Well, hey folks, Real Honesty with John Ritlin. I'm John Ritlin. It's Times in Wrestling to Piss Me Off, Part 11. And I want to thank you guys so much for making this Redux series, this, Times in Wrestling to Piss Me Off Redux edition. Thank you for making them so popular. It's doing a ton better than the original series. One, there's a lot better subjects to talk about. I can dive more into some of these things. It's better video quality, obviously. As you can tell, I'm not on Ustream like I was with the previous series. And really, overall, I'm not recording these things in like such a glut. It's like I release them over the course of 2 months, and with these, it's going to be over the course of probably about 6 months. Some for about a month here and there, and then some for a couple months, and then maybe a couple months off and stuff like that. But just thank you guys so much for making this series such a success. As of the recording of this, the parts that are on the channel are doing so damn well. So I just want to thank you guys so much for that. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The Ambrose Asylum match between Dean Ambrose and Chris Jericho, and oh sweet Christ, this was bad. The Ambrose-Jericho feud I was actually looking forward to. Because you got you got Jericho, one of the best veterans currently. I mean, he's slowing down, obviously, as anybody will, but he's still a premier worker when he makes his short, when he has his short bursts of returns. And then you have Dean Ambrose, who's just a great lunatic, and you think with these two, with being good on the mic, like they are allowed to turn loose, he had a thumbtack spot in this. But oh my God, to get to that point, there were all these weapon spots. It was a stupid cage with all these weapons hanging up like a straitjacket. This was over a potted plant and a jacket. It should have been so much better than it was, but it was a match that should have maybe taken about 12, 13 minutes, and it was, 25? I mean, it felt like it took about 4 years to get done. It just was really, really bad. I mean, again, that thumbtack spot was pretty cool, and the fact that they did that even in the PG era was great, but my God, it's like to get to that point, you're watching it, and you're just like, it was one of the worst matches of 2016, by far. No matter the efforts of Jericho and Ambrose, who are two tremendous workers, two premier workers as far as I'm concerned, it was a laboriously paced, trashy match. It wasn't a good weapon spot match. If they had had stuff hanging off the cage, kind of like Raven's Clockwork Orange House of Fun match that they did in NWA TNA wrestling, and during that era, which actually was a pretty damn good one, pretty damn good stipulation. They did one with Sandman, but they also did one with X-Pac. He was Six-Pac, or Sean Waltman. He was one of the two, and he was in I think it was the May pay-per-view that they did in 2005, which I think was Hard Justice 2005. That was a pretty good one. But the whole point is, if they had had more weapons in, like, if they had had tables sitting somewhere and stuff like that they could have used, if they had had chairs, hanging off, kendo sticks, whatever, instead of hanging up in the corners, of the cage, okay, then maybe they could have made this work if they had made it just a little more gimmicky and a little more ridiculous. But the climbing to the spots and getting the weapons took forever, and it wasn't good drama. Besides that thumbtack spot, it was nothing to write home about with this match, and it was, quite frankly, a piss-poor attempt to make this feud mean something. When this feud should have been great. Between these two guys, this feud should have been one of the best feuds of 2016. And they cut him off at the goddamn knees. It was terrible. Now we move on to Nikki Bella as Divas champion. I want to take this moment to say that I'm not going to shit on Nikki as a worker. I've never cared for Nikki as a worker necessarily. I will say that she improved. Did this title reign have something to do with the fact that at the time she was dating John Cena? Probably. Did it have more to do with them wanting to pick her to be the one to have a spite reign to piss off AJ Lee because AJ Lee was leaving, and at the time AJ Lee was the longest reigning Divas champion ever? I think that was more of it. It does have to do with who you know and what you do, so yeah. Am I saying, though, that Nikki didn't improve? Nah, Nikki improved enough in the ring. I mean, I don't think she deserved a 300-plus day title reign, but whatever. I think it was 300-plus day. I think it was, 306, 307, something like that. I don't remember the exact thing, and this is why I want to say mainly that it pissed me off. Because it was poorly booked from when Nikki first won the title of Survivor Series 2014. The whole thing where it was like a few seconds and Brie had kissed AJ, which was weird. And then they had a rematch, I think, at TLC, and then I don't even know if Nikki defended the title at the Royal Rumble. I don't remember the 2015 Royal Rumble that well because it was rubbish. And then they had this like limp match at at I think the February pay-per-view or whatever, February or March, might even been both because it was before the brand split. But again, this wasn't necessarily Nikki's fault. Nikki was also dealing with a neck injury and I believe even a back injury at the time. And it had to have been tough, the toll and the injuries that she had on her body, and it must have been tough for her to fight through that and to keep the title reign going. And I get that they booked her around all that so she wouldn't have to do as much. But they kept the title on her and they made the title meaningless. They made it meaningless. One, they should have, from the first time that she had beaten AJ Lee, and maybe actually after the first time, after TLC 2014, they should have had a clock, or, a ticker right there where Nikki said, I'm going to be the longest reigning Divas champion of all time. From right there, from about 30 days after Survivor Series, or something like that. Or maybe at the beginning of 2015 or something like that. New year and a ticker, I am going to be the longest reigning Divas champion of all time. They had a match, it was, the Bellas versus Paige and AJ, Paige as I call them, at WrestleMania 31. And then after that, Nikki barely defended the title. They booked her in a lot of, tag matches, 6-woman tag matches. And they made the title meaningless. And then finally when they introduced that whole ticker thing, the ticker is down, it's AJ Lee's record and Nikki Bella's record. Instead of building on that for months and months and months, they did it, I want to say right around the time, it might have been June or July that they finally decided to do it. Because she was getting very close to the record at that point. It happened in September. If they had built on that for months and months and months, okay, people might have gotten tired of it on TV, but it would have built a drama. Who can take her down? Can Paige take her down? Can anyone take her down? Can Sasha, Charlotte, Becky, any of these recent NXT call-ups, because that happened in July of 2015, can any of these women do it? And that was like a fantasy booking thing, where if I actually cared about it, I would actually do that, but that's something that really irritated me about it. I was less yeah, okay, it probably had to do with who she was dating, or a spite reign. I think it was more a spite reign, and they just picked Nikki, and they just said, hey, just so you know, you're going to get a lot of hate for this, but we're going to give you the title for 300 plus days because we're angry at AJ Lee. I'm less angry at Nikki, and I'm more angry at the booking, because they had the real potential to make it not just all shoved at the end, where suddenly, she... they did the Bella twin switch thing where Charlotte had pinned Brie on accident and then Nikki had rolled her up and this kind of stuff, but then they made the match for Night of Champions and then Charlotte had beaten Nikki Bella. Great. Okay, fantastic. She'd managed to beat her and it meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. What in the world is this? I'll be right back, folks. All right, thank you, folks. Short break there. But the bottom line is even though I'm not the biggest fan of Nikki Bella at all, or either Bella, they could have booked that title reign a whole lot better. So I'm more irritated at the creative decisions than I am anything else. So, now we move on to Jinder as WWE Champion. I hated this. I absolutely hated this. One, I don't care if the guy ate cleaner and did all this stuff and whatever. I don't buy it for a second. I don't buy that that's it. Am I sure that he changed his diet and changed his workout regimen? Yes, I'm sure he did that. And great that he did. If he's happier, if he's healthier, that's fantastic. Take a look at his physique and tell me, I don't know why he became WWE Champion, or yeah, that's all natural. Would he be the only one that did something to alter his body chemically? Absolutely not. But this is why it irritated me. You know how they made him U.S. Champion for all of a few days? I think it was 8 days. If they had made him U.S. Champion last year and built to a WWE title reign, or at least a WWE title shot, people might have believed it more. But they took him literally from jobbing to Rob Gronkowski and Mojo Rawley at WrestleMania 33 to less than 2 months later, he's suddenly WWE Champion. And there were people that love it, shove it in the face. There were people that got on board with it. Oh, yay, he's getting to live his dream. Look, I ain't knocking Jinder the guy. I don't care about Jinder the guy. He certainly shouldn't have been told to kill himself or do any of this kind of stuff or do any of that or whatever. I'm certainly not going to say that Jinder is the worst person in the world. He obviously did something, because all that back knee doesn't happen just because. It doesn't happen just because. So yeah, I'm saying without saying that he did something chemically along with altering his diet and his workout regimen. So good for him. But him as WWE champion, the worst WWE champion of all time, by the way. I don't fucking care what anyone thinks. You guys can think, your own deal. You got your own brain, you got your own mind. If you want to think that Jinder was not that bad of a WWE champion, great. But his continued feud with Randy Orton was shit. It ruined Shinsuke Nakamura for the short term. They had to turn him heel after WrestleMania 34, or at WrestleMania 34, just to give him a tweak to a character, because they pretty much butchered him as a face on, creatively. But the matches he had with Randy Orton were crap. At Backlash, at Money in the Bank, at Battleground, the Punjabi prison match where Orton was going to climb down the Punjabi prison, or climb up the Punjabi prison, and then Great Khali made his return, his one-off return, thankfully. And Orton could have climbed over, gotten in the car. Actually, he could have climbed over. He could have gotten in the shower, changed, gotten into nice clothes, gotten in his car, and left before Great Khali was able to get to the ring. That was another thing that really pissed me off about that. And then the whole thing with Nakamura was ridiculous. And then they realized that building up Jinder versus Brock wasn't going to work. I was at the last SmackDown that they did before they realized, oh shit, this isn't a good idea. Or at least I think it was. No, it might have actually been the 2 weeks before they switched the title. But we're in Seattle, and Jinder's doing this whole thing where he's talking, he's saying, oh, I'm going to beat Brock Lesnar, and it was met with laughter because nobody believed it. I mean, nobody fucking believed it. It's just, his title reign was an abortion. It was just a goddamn abortion. Good for him. He got to be WWE champion. They better not give him any title reign ever again. Never. Because this was absolute dog shit. And speaking of dog shit, Eva Marie. Here's why Eva Marie pissed me off. Because they knew what they had in her. They tried to make her a wrestler, which was a terrible idea. Have her be a valet. Have her be somebody that they can boo just because she's out there. Have her interfere and do a forearm or something, even though she didn't look like she could throw a goddamn punch, a work kick, or anything at all, without getting like a buffering, like the YouTube buffering symbol in her eyes. Eva Marie just couldn't do anything. I do give her credit for trying to get better in the ring. And at least, unlike Sable, Eva Marie did take bumps. She didn't take very good bumps, but she tried to take bumps. But the thing is they tried with poor Brian Kendrick. I mean, he was rehired and trained Eva Marie, and Brian Kendrick deserves a lifetime contract for having to put up with and try to train Eva Marie, who I'm sure was not honestly that bad of a person. She's not attractive at all. Sorry. If you guys think she's attractive, that's fine. That's your opinion. I think your opinion's wrong, but whatever. You guys can think that if you want. There are women I think are attractive that others don't. Eva Marie just struck me as too fake. But honest to God, and here's the deal. Here's the bottom line with Eva Marie. They tried to make her something that just wasn't going to work. They tried to make her a wrestler. Yeah, okay, they started a whole thing before she got popped for the a wellness violation that they had her. Oh, she was just really bad at wrestling. They were going to have her be a heat magnet. Great, okay, that sort of worked, but you're playing on the whole thing that she's the anti-woman's wrestler, because she wasn't any good. She wasn't a good athlete. She wasn't a natural. She couldn't run the ropes. She ran the ropes a little bit better than Kelly Kelly. That's not saying much, because the reason Kelly Kelly could not run the ropes well but figured out what she was doing is because her back was against something. That's why she was able to do that. And yes, I know what I'm saying contradicts some stuff I've said where we need to promote more positivity, but I never cared for Kelly Kelly, and I'm talking about her in the ring. Outside of the ring, I'm sure she's a lovely person. Outside the ring, I'm sure Eva Marie is a lovely person. But there were people even saying that she should have been NXT champion. She should have been one that dethroned Bayley. I think it was November 2015. If they had had that, it would have been worse than what Medusa did with the WWE Women's Championship about 20 years before that. Close to 20 years before that, where Medusa threw it in the trash. It would have been worse. Eva Marie was likely going to be the first ever SmackDown Women's Champion before she got, suspended for 30 days and then never came back to TV. Thank you, whatever you took, because you gave us, the ability to never have Eva Marie on TV again. They wasted money on her. She was a waste of money. She was a waste of money. Bottom line, that's really just what she was. She was not any good, terrible person. Like, what the fuck? Or a terrible person in the ring. Not a terrible person outside the ring, but it's a terrible person in the ring. And now we move on to, and this might go a little bit longer, Vince Russo as world champion. I'm just going to be brief here and basically say that Vince Russo is probably one of the biggest cancers to ever happen to pro wrestling. In part because of some of the people that, worked with him that suddenly got a big head, like they're suddenly bigger than the sport, or they can talk down to people and act like people, who don't support Donald Trump are bad people. And yeah, some of you listeners may actually know who I'm talking about. But also, Vince Russo as world champion was a slap. It was a bigger slap in the face of David Arquette, because at least David was a fan. Arquette was a fan. Russo was never a fan. He was never any good at writing wrestling. Sorry, he just wasn't. Now, did he give some good ideas that got reshaped? Sure. But him writing WCW, okay, in the beginning, great. Him and Ed Ferrara, that stupid fat fuck that I hope is miserable and continues to be miserable for his horribly tasteless impersonation of JR with Bell's palsy. I hope he's miserable for that. Vince Russo as world champion was trash. Him and Ed Ferrara in the beginning, I guess, writing TV, the ratings started to tick up. Well, fantastic. They weren't ticking up fast enough. Whether that was Russo's and Ferrara's fault or whatever is irrelevant. Vince Russo booking himself to be world champion. People say, oh, well, Vince McMahon did that. Yes, but Vince put it as part of an angle. WCW's world title by that point, it had been, 15, 16 title reigns? Actually, I think it was 15 title reigns when Booker had won it was the San Francisco match, or whatever, the box match. It was the Gold Rush match, or whatever it was, that had the boxes and had a picture of Scott Hall in the box, actually had a world title in it, and it fell out, and Booker had to get the title and bring it in the ring to win the match. It was a mess. That was the 15th world title change in 6 months. It made the belt meaningless. But then again, Vince Russo himself, beyond being just a royal prick, is essentially meaningless. Besides being a punchline. I mean, that's essentially what he is. And he's a coward because he gets orders of protection against people instead of facing them like a man. He's not capable of facing people like a man. Stevie Ray eviscerating him was wonderful on Stevie Ray's podcast, Stand Up for Greatness. I love that podcast. I do whatever I can to listen to any clips of it. If I can't listen to the full episode, Stevie Ray is great, and I'm so happy that he eviscerated Vince Russo, and I'm happy with anybody else that eviscerates Vince Russo. I feel sorry for him. I hope his children, grow up and can become better people than he ever could. They're already more mature than he could ever be, because Russo is incapable of being mature. Now we finish up with the Kennel from Hell match. Oh, sweet Christ, where do we start with this? Big Boss Man feeding Al Snow's dog Pepper to him. You don't like how Pepper tastes? To be fair, Boss Man did the best he could and tried to make that mean something, but they did that, and they did a Kennel from Hell thing, where it was a Hell in a Cell over a steel cage, and in between the cage and the Hell in a Cell, it was like a pre-Punjabi prison match. It was like a pre-Punjabi prison match. It was terrible. It was a bad match. It was. And I think, even if I'm right, I think it was Mick Foley and Kevin Kelly that were on commentary that just eviscerated the whole damn thing. That might have just actually been commentary for Mick Foley's DVD, Hard Knocks Cheap Pops, which actually was a pretty good set. But you had Al Snow versus Big Boss Man, and you had guards or like dog handlers with like dogs that were around the ring. That the dogs were supposed to be vicious, but either they were sniffing each other's butts, as dogs are known to do, scratching their ears, this kind of stuff, as again, dogs are known to do, wandering around chasing their tails, dogs do that, or they pissed and shit all over the ring and it was a really bad smell. It was a bad, terrible match. The only reason this might not be the worst Hell in a Cell match ever, essentially is because this was done mainly for comedy, and a lot of people won't remember it unless somebody brings it up. But unlike the Boss Man being hung by Undertaker, that's something people will remember. The Kennel from Hell match was just absolute crap, and I think it was right around the time that Vince Russo left the company. It's fitting that something with piss and dog shit would have Vince Russo's mark on it. And if Vince Russo didn't have anything to do with it, I'm still going to blame him anyway, because he's buried enough people and done enough bad shit and enough bad characters that he deserves that kind of treatment. So yeah, he deserves every bad thing said about him. So anyway, that's what I gotta say. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what I said? Like, share, comment, subscribe. Twitter link in the description. Spend real honesty with Jar Mitlin. I'm Jar Mitlin. I will see you soon.